we go. Another day, another Agent Boost podcast episode. Today's actually a special episode because it's technically the 100th episode that we have put out and published. So maybe we can get some like fanfare.
Let's go.
Yeah, we kept thinking of something big and exciting we could do, but hey, we couldn't get any VIP guests on here, so you've got us, and it's the 100th episode. It's actually, we've mentioned it before, there are some lost episodes that'll never see the light of day, so we're quite beyond that anyway.
Good old compliance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some of those episodes that'll never be released. But me, Mike, with Aaron, our director of marketing.
Yes, sir.
Dan is gone again. Dan and I have not been in the same room for more than a handful of times since basically the 4th of July. So
pretty rare.
Yeah, the carrier rollout season and the summer has been really brutal. We've had a lot going on. So Dana is back with Jeff, our EVP of ACA and ancillary, and they're at the United Healthcare rollout for ACA. So that's been fun. Been fun to go out to UHC's headquarters twice this year. But it's just been an absolutely insane roller coaster. So maybe one of these days we'll get back on track and it'll be the two of us.
Yeah, that would be nice.
But there's been a lot of breaking news. I don't know if breaking news in the Medicare and ACA space is
continuous news.
Yeah, really that exciting to anybody outside of those of us that are in the industry and listening. But, one of the things that I wanted to talk about as we're kind of going into annual enrollment is something that's been on my mind a lot, which is this the end of Medicare call centers or call centers in the health insurance space, basically in general? And I kind of put that out there as a, interesting question. And I don't think it is the end for sure just to get there.
No.
But it's definitely the end of the way things have been over the past couple of years. And that's why I have Aaron on is, that this is kind of his world, his purview to add color when we start getting into some of the details.
Yeah, it's been last, few years. I've been with you guys 2.5 years now, and previous, kind of an aggregator, if you will. And, it's changed drastically as it relates to call centers and the types of leads and the calls and how they're all generated. And it's it has become somewhat of a nightmare, to be honest.
Yeah. So, I wanted to just basically clarify some things for everybody. So, we can kind of talk about how we got here, right? How calls and the call center world kind of proliferated throughout the Medicare space and where we're at right now, what we're seeing and experiencing. As I've been talking to our other friends in the industry right now and talking to carriers, and, there's just pretty much news coming out regarding calls and call centers on the Medicare and ACA space basically every day, every week now.
Yep.
And the industry is really evolving. And I thought it would be appropriate to do this topic right now as we gear up for annual enrollment because, as we always do in this industry, there are more beneficiaries that need help than ever before this upcoming fall. And yet one of the major ways that we've been able to do that seems to be very heavily scrutinized and being deconstructed as we speak. Yep. So with that, just so we're being fully transparent, Agent Boost has always, or for years, has had what we call a virtual agency. We've always been very strategic to try to not call it a call center and really try to not operate in strategy, in function, like some of our competitors, some of our, and I don't even really say competitors, but some of these big box call centers, so to say. We've always felt like because our DNA was field agents. We grew up in the industry doing face-to-face, belly-to-belly, meeting Mima at the kitchen table. We wanted to bring that experience of a good quality field agent and use telephone and tech to connect with a beneficiary that needs help.
Right.
And so that's always been our objective and how we've been different. The other thing, too, and we'll talk a lot about this today, is we've never operated on a HEAP model. And HEAP has kind of become a real hot topic in the industry lately. And we'll kind of talk about where that's at, how it kind of became proliferated, what it is. But we've always slowly, stably, and predictively grown our own virtual agency and our business on our own stable, predictable cash flow. And the way you do that is by writing policies that stick, focusing on accretion, focusing on retention, and living and off that cash flow that those ongoing policies generate. That's how
referrals face to face.
Yeah, making sure you write good quality policies and that you're there to manage those lives on the back end and be there and have some support.
Yep.
Now, that's not to say that we've been perfect. That's not to say that we haven't fallen into some of the same traps that a lot of other call centers have. And we're always trying to evolve. And one of the things that I'm proud of is that we generally seem to be a few months ahead of the curve. And I think we've already kind of been making some adjustments in the way that we've been doing business before the industry forces us to do that.
Right.
And we've always had, even on the call side of things, on the virtual side of things, we've had above average accretion, above average retention and CPAs and things like that. And we've had a much lower CTM rate complaints that we'll also talk about today.
Yeah.
So basically, I want to kind of back up a little bit and talk about how did call centers kind of proliferate throughout the Medicare space. And this kind of goes back to the, early days of your career as well. But, for a long time when I got in the industry, these insurance carriers really needed a human body. They just needed someone with a pulse to go out and meet with somebody face to face, get a paper application and fax it in, right? And that was really how the Medicare Advantage space grew from, the early days of the mid 2005 to 2010, 12, right around the time Obamacare hit. And that was the way we did it, right? Yeah. We did it by sending out mailers to people that were interested. We did it by doing seminars. In the early days, you could buy people a dinner. You could buy people a nice dinner, right, and sit down and pitch them. And frankly, that was really great. Dan and I have clients that we wrote then that we put on Place with Good Business, and we've been getting paid on those policies, and they've been on the books, some of them on the same plan for 15, 16, 17 years. Yeah. And so I look at this, with the hindsight of almost 2 decades in the industry, and you go, not everything that we always change and that we try to adapt to for the benefit of the consumer has worked with the intended. None of the, a lot of the industry has kind of changed and evolved in a worse way.
Well, and, a lot of the regulations that have come out of, doing those dinners, educational versus, transactional, if you will. It's still a good model if you do it correctly, and it's fairly inexpensive. It does take a little bit more follow-up, which is what a lot of these call centers aren't great at, is the follow-up, for 3-4 months to when they're actually eligible to enroll, turning 65. And, we see some agents have great success with that. But the attention span in the digital world has kind of changed a lot of that, I think.
Yeah. So, what really happened was, as Medicare Advantage kind of proved out the concept that it was really good, right? And that it was working with its intended purpose, which was that model of care, and it was a win-win-win, right? It was profitable for the insurance carriers. Medicare liked it because they were able to get better benefits, and with public-private partnership, consumers liked it because they were able to get better benefits for their money, and agents liked it because we could, make some money. It's that quadruple win. Yep. Well, as Medicare Advantage started proliferating, and even supplements, it became big business, right? It became big industry, and where money goes, attention flows as well. Yep. And all of a sudden you had all these larger players, especially as we started getting into the, after the couple years of the introduction of Obamacare, and it looked like Medicare Advantage was, here to stay. And then you had this kind of 2013, 2014, 15 era where not only that, there was a lot more money and attention. How do you reach all these consumers, right? The opportunity in Medicare Advantage and supplements was gigantic.
Huge.
Because we've got 70 million beneficiaries there, right? It's hard to have a local licensed individual agent go down by the ones and meet every single person and be able to get them to sign a paper application and fax it in. Technology and operational efficiency started becoming into play, you know? And here at Agent Boost, 2017, 2018, Dan and I started thinking, these consumers are no longer like the consumers aging in when we were doing Medicare. in the early days, you could run into a 65-year-old back then that had never used a computer.
Right.
And now, or you know, the end of 2018, 2019, it was extremely rare because they'd all been in the workplace. They'd all been using computers for 20 years.
Yep. Well, and not only that, it's digital marketplace took over, and there's already other industries that have already way more advanced in the tech world and the call center world, and then the opportunity became that much greater because plans are getting better, if operations were getting better, and there's just so many more people out there making phone calls.
Yeah.
And so now you have these other. I was born and raised in Utah, worked at ClearLink, so that's just a good example. Unfortunately, they just closed their doors.
Yeah, we'll get there. Yeah.
But call centers like ClearLink, who started in the phone, internet, and TV space, running digital ads, driving inbound phone calls all day. If you're driving inbound phone calls all day, you need people to answer the phones. And so you already have this infrastructure of call center employees answering phone calls, and it just snowballed into the next opportunity.
Yeah. So basically what happened was opportunity and technology, the industry was ripe, and call centers became this emergence, right? And in those days, it was very cut and dry. You were either call center or you were field, right? And there was not a lot of doing the two. These entities were already doing recorded calls then. And like you said, our industry's always been notoriously 5 to 10 years behind every other industry. And we still are, in a lot of ways. The way we do business, the speed at which these changes make, and a lot of it's because of government regulation and oversight, and protecting, these vulnerable seniors, which I get, totally. But we're still very, very slow to adapt to industry standards at large. And so you had this explosion of the call centers, right? And you had the proliferation of, I call them like the big three, the eHealths, the Select Quotes, the GoHealths. And those guys had the tech, they had the systems, and they were able to do mass volume, right? And
lots of cash.
They were able to get lots of cash then. They were able to rise. They were able to do recorded calls. And so they could do it in a compliant way in scale and mass. Well,
compliant in those days.
Yeah. And what happened was basically they started getting leverage, right? They started doing volume, and with volume, they got power and they got money, and you had all the carriers that were throwing lots of money at them to be on their platform and to generate leads, and it became a really, really big industry, right?
Well, and when you get to, an entity that size, in those days, it's much easier nowadays to target in those particular areas. But hey, there's at the DOJ, right? The reason that a lot of these entities are in hot waters because they were targeting specific areas and not writing what should be written. But it goes back to being able to target specific people in specific areas, which is why they had leverage with the carriers, because they wanted their plans to grow.
Well, and let's be honest here, guys. There has been and will continue to be a need and a necessity for people to get help telephonically, virtually, any way, shape, or form. There's just no way you can help that many consumers, that many beneficiaries. There are people that live in the sticks and the hollers in the rural areas and stuff that just will never be able to get. It won't be logistically effective for somebody to go meet with that person face to face and help them always. There will be a need, right? But it kind of got taken advantage of. And then what happened was, the rise of, I'll call it the Joe Namath era. And, everybody knows that famously, a lot of these call centers, and it was the Transacts, the Willis Towers Watsons, the GoHealth, the eHealth, they were all, the model, the blueprint became run a really ridiculous ad so many times, so prolific that seniors just couldn't ignore it, advertising ridiculous benefits that were only available to a small fraction of consumers with a little disclaimer on the TV, and run those so many times, so permeated across every industry where you looked, every news channel, everything, that seniors were convinced that they were fools if they weren't always calling in to get these new benefits that everybody else was getting. And the model essentially evolved into run a bait and switch type ad that was very misleading, but while being technically compliant, call into I'll just say it, a poorly trained, not insurance agent, a poorly trained enroller who was looking for surface level benefits, maybe not always doing the quality leads analysis. And then it became, here we go, just churn and churn and churn and go. And that became the model, right? Well,
then it's right, this carrier, not that carrier.
Yeah. And then like we're dealing with some of these lawsuits is like, what was always the motivation for writing these particular plans? Was it, some sort of financial incentive at large? Was it, and we know there was, right? You were on this team or you were on that team, or you were incentivized to write that versus this. And we're dealing with the aftermath of a lot of that. Well, a couple other things happened. CMS, in my opinion, has caused a lot of the current consternation and issues that we have with calls in general and call centers, because year over year, slowly and surely, they've ratcheted down the marketing compliance and guidelines and what you can do so heavily, so stringently, so ridiculous that most people, most agents, most small agencies do not know how to market in a compliant and cost-efficient way.
Yeah.
They frankly do not know. That's the number one issue and game right now with agents is, well, how do I get in front of consumers that do want and do need help? How do I do it in a compliant way? I can't, any of the things that we used to do are modified or shut down or not apply in some way for some reason or another.
Yeah, it started with, the Joe Namath, for example, is all these ridiculous benefits that everybody can get, so to speak. But to your point is, very small percentage of those people can actually get those benefits. And so CMS is like, okay, well, this is creating problems, and they're just driving inbound phone calls as a marketer should or wants to, right? But now it's, okay, instead of running ads with these specific benefits on them, now we have to target these specific areas with these specific benefits with these specific carriers. And so now it's becoming more and more hard to run compliant ads and get people to call because, the benefits aren't for everybody, and that's okay. But you got to get people to call, and, then you have these call centers that are, writing whatever carrier that they want or need based on, the money. And then the consumer gets jaded because now they have a plan that doesn't fit their actual needs, plus the creative that they saw online and these benefits. Now they got shoved into a plan that they shouldn't be in, and then they get a complaint, and then we're back to CMS, and we're changing things.
We'll get there a lot, and we'll spend a lot of the back half of the podcast talking about that in detail. But essentially, CMS has continued to crack down and shut down all these other viable marketing things to where it became this kind of carve out, right? And then the other thing that happened was COVID.
Right.
And so right around, as we all know, beginning of 2020, the world shut down.
Yeah.
We were very in a great spot because we'd already started teaching our agents how to do business virtually and remotely in a compliant way. And that was one of the things that really propelled Agent Boost in our agency to the next level was, hey, we already have good, and here's the key, highly trained, good quality agents that can help people all over the country in a compliant and efficient way. And they have skin in the game to make sure those people are on the right policies in the beginning and that they stay on those policies and retain them, right? And so, but that wasn't the case for necessarily everybody. And everybody in the industry started scrambling as you couldn't meet with anybody, agents couldn't meet face to face. What happened was the call centers became even more powerful. And everybody became a call center. And you started having the rise of all, I'll call them the second generation call centers, the Assurances, the ClearLinks, the Transacts and Willis Towers Watsons got bigger. And then not only that, but you had every FMO and every other agency who their field agents needed to somehow become some sort of hybrid field agent at that point because they couldn't meet with consumers face to face, right? And so, and just like anything else, the healthcare industry obviously was very slow to get back to normal. And so we had the lingering effects of COVID well into, end of 2023, 2024 even. And we've built all this infrastructure to do enrollments that way with Medicare, right? That's how the industry evolved to and created. And field agents became, a sub-segment of that because the rules that CMS has set and the way that the industry evolved and the practicality and the logistics of doing it, it became easier for the business to be done over the phone, right? Well, one of the things, the kind of the final piece is what I'll call the third iteration or the third generation of doing phone sales has been over the past year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
There's been this rise and proliferation of a bunch of other agencies that live and die on a HEAP model, right? And HEAP has been really heavily scrutinized over the past, this year as well. And for those of you that don't know what a HEAP model is, essentially you get paid a one-time lump sum commission up front. And you only get paid that. You get paid a little bit of it up front. And very specifically, it used to be 50-50. You'd get paid, and a lot of these carriers were paying $800 or $1,000. And I don't really want to call out who it is specifically. Everybody knows who it is, and they're one of our partners in a way. And so I don't want to go too hard on it because I definitely know that they're adjusting some of these things. But I don't blame them is the other reason, because like I say all the time, show me your comp plan. Yeah. I'll show you the behavior. Yep. Show me your financial incentives. Show me how you've built the industry and the model and the rules and the compliance, and I'll show you the behavior. And that's where we're at right now with the industry, So you had a lot of these agencies that started spinning up on this HEAP model. And essentially they would get $800 to $1,000 for an enrollment. And the game they would try to play is their acquisition cost, their CPA, less than what that commission is, their LTV. Yep. And for a while, and for some of them it was, they're buying calls, their CPAs, $200, $300, they're paying an agent commission, and they're netting that margin. Yep. Well, a couple things have happened over the past year, but what I want to really kind of highlight or illustrate is why that model became so prolific. Number one, like I just described, that's how the industry has essentially distilled to and consolidated with all these other industry factors, with the compliance and marketing guidelines, COVID, spinning up these infrastructures, and the compensation went there too, right? Yep. So the 48-hour scope just made everything worse because everybody's like, well, if I get an inbound call, I don't have to deal with that stupid, ridiculous 48-hour scope, So again, show me your comp plan. I'll show you the behavior. Well, a couple other things have happened because the ACA world had its own problems in the call center world. Like everybody had been running these churn and burn call centers on the ACA space. And about over the past 18 months, all of those have been burned out of the industry because they were either not doing it in a compliant way and they've, had to adjust fraudulent ways, but really the market economics weren't in place anymore. Those policies were sand through the hands, the dollars weren't working. So what happened was a lot of those call centers just re-rolled and all of a sudden became Medicare HEAP shops, right? Yep. We've also seen final expense HEAP shops. They're like, oh, there's good money in that. Re-roll. I'm a Medicare HEAP shop where I'm making a lump sum commission, And then the final thing before I let you get into what you're going to say is then we've had the sales bros get into the space over the past year and a half that were doing final expense and that have been doing solar and had their own challenges and things like that, door to door. And then you have guys that are like, yo, you can write Medicare and you can earn Lambos and Rolexes by writing Medicare policies quick over the phone like this. And all of a sudden you've had all these sales bros coming in on a HEAP model that are talented, hardworking, good salespeople, but they were just coached to do it in a way that wasn't the way the industry needs to be done, right? And that's where we've been this year.
Yeah, 100%. And, to the third iteration of the kind of the storyline there was marketing. It all boils back to marketing. It's these marketing companies, affiliate marketing, internal media buying, marketing, whatever you want to call them, and every iteration of them is they see where opportunity is. When someone comes and, hey, do you have a Medicare offer that we can run? Because I got a call center, I need 15 inbounds a day per agent, and I can have a CPA up to 300. They're like, okay, cool. They start running some Medicare ads, they start driving some calls, getting some good CPAs, and they go and find another buyer for their calls. Mm-hmm. Then they're like, okay, we can handle a $400 CPA. They're like, well, why can you handle a 400? They can handle a 300. Mm-hmm. What's going on there? He's like, oh, well, let me explain it to you. I have this HEAP model that if I write a policy and it stays for 120 days, I get a 50% up front, 50% on the back end, $800 to $1,000, done and done, and I don't have to deal with that consumer anymore. I sell it off and I get my upfront commission. So now I can have a $400 CPA and pay my agent $200 and make $200 to $400 per policy that we write. So now I was like, oh, well, I generate calls for $10 or $15. So now I can hire a licensed insurance agent, get my agency license or my agent license and become an agency, hire 10 agents, put them as LOA or make them W-2, pick your poison. They have pros and cons to both. And then they're like, okay, cool. You had a $300 CPA, you had a $400 CPA, I have a $200 CPA, haha. And now I can double, triple, quadruple my sales team. And now that at a $15 cost per call. Now that, let's call it, in the Medicare space, but then they found out about ACA. And that's when it really blew up, because ACA is the Wild West. We all know that. It's been going on for a couple of years now and it's getting better, but these marketing companies coming in and saying, I can get a HEAP model on ACA and advance on ACA $150 or whatever the number was. And I can run calls and I'm converting calls at 50% because I can just re-enroll them no matter what. And now instead of a $200 CPA like Medicare, I can get a $50 CPA or a $40 CPA in ACA and make $150 and keep going.
You're exactly right. Yeah, that's a critical one that I missed, was the lead generators that were like, you know what?
I could do that.
Making $10 and is nice on a call, but I could make $400, and I think I'll just eat my own dog food, And so that's where we've been at the industry. Okay, so here's the problem, and we've seen this literally collapsing on itself. We've seen the government really, both administrations, trying to crack down on the complaints. And of course, I also think this has been a real source of contention from, let's call it, field agents and call centers, is everybody wants to think of a call center in the worst way, right? Meaning the days of the Joe Namath ads where your clients are getting these really misleading advertisements saying they can get all this money back on their Part B and all this dental and all this dollars back. And then your clients are calling you going, well, how come I can't get that? Or why didn't you put me on that? Or you find out that your long-term client left you because they've heard these ads so long, they just feel stupid if they're not calling in to get the new benefits,
Right.
And so there's been a lot of animosity there. And I think one of the things that I want to talk about is there's a lot of agents that are kind of dancing on the graves of the call centers, so to say. And I don't necessarily think, that's the right attitude and the right approach. And I would say that the modern call center, the modern people who are doing business over the past 2 years are doing it in a much heavier regulated way. The scrutiny is so intense. The calls are all recorded. They're held to such a high standard that it's a much higher standard than most of these field agents are doing. I'll just put it that way. Yeah. You're not having all your sales interactions at the kitchen table recorded. Nobody is there listening to your QCing everything, making sure you covered everything. So, don't be too excited there, buddy, about thinking that you're so much more superior. And what's really happened is the industry is no longer able to sustain it even in its current state because the market economics don't work, right? And then as the second piece where the real heavy compliance and aggressively pursuing these call centers is coming to play, it's basically making it not sustainable for anybody. And to speak to the first thing, and look, the proof is in the pudding. Look, guys, everybody knows GoHealth is basically not selling any policies anymore. They're waiting to see what happens. Willis Towers Watson, Transact, they're laying people off like crazy. Clearlink just went under. Assurance went under last year. They're laying people off and
terminating contracts,
terminating and getting out of the business in mass right now. So nothing I'm saying is a surprise. And I think it's sad too, because a lot of the current leadership with these entities has been doing a great job, and they're just kind of living of the sins and the system that they've been set up with, And I think that in general, most of them have been trying to do a really good job and serve a need, but it's kind of a little bit too little too late, right? And what's happened is because the industry has distilled so much around the pursuit of these inbound calls, you have a lot of spinning up an aggregation on the lead generation side of things. And how do you get calls, right? Well, you can't outbound people. That's illegal. So you got to buy inbound calls, right?
Yep.
So everyone's trying to buy consumer generated inbound calls. Well, who do you go through for that? A lot of us are going through the same, 5, 10 big national vendors. And then what happens is, what we're seeing is you're only reaching the bottom level of these consumers that are in this churn, right? This ecosystem. And we're buying calls, and 3 months later, someone else is buying that call. And 3 months later, this guy's buying that call. And then this guy's buying that call. And they're all hearing a good sales pitch and whatever, and they're changing. And what you've had the costs explode, right? So the acquisition costs are so much higher. And the LTV, the lifetime value of those policies, has completely cratered.
Tanked.
And then a lot of these new entities, the second and third generation people that are getting in that were kind of making it work on the margins,
Yep.
Now that they're seeing those things tweaking a little bit, meaning their HEAP model is adjusted, or they're getting less upfront, and their accretion, meaning the policies are not going into effect, and their rapid disenrollments are so bad, and they're all at like this 50% rate. They're like, this doesn't make sense. I'm not making money because I wrote all these policies. I paid these guys. I have my overhead. I'm paying for this office space and all this tech and stuff like that. I have no margins. And they're all getting tapped out left and right.
Yep.
Then the other thing that's happened is now CMS has just come flying in with the flaming sword of justice of cracking down on these, everybody's a bad call center. And the carriers have been getting so much pressure that, like Dan and I always say, poop rolls downhill, right? Crap rolls downhill. And so now the carriers, and a couple of them real specifically, Devoted's hyper aggressive.
Yeah.
And we've really given Devoted a lot of love and grace on this podcast over the years. And I love those guys in that company, but they're cutting off their nose to spite their face, and they're really damaging their trust and credibility with the brokers right now with how hyper
letter of the
aggressive.
law to them.
Well,
it's no different. You can't skirt it at all.
It's like one and done. You get a complaint where there's smoke, there's fire, and they're just terminating. And it's not just them. WellCare's doing it right now too. Other carriers are doing it. Everybody is looking to correct because they're getting so much pressure from CMS, and everything is always a pendulum swinging, guys. Yeah. And the pendulum has swung back so far this other way in the correction side that it's making it unsustainable. So because of the market economics, because of the compliance, everybody's just going, apparently this doesn't work anymore, right? Yeah. And at the end of it, I think that's great.
Yeah, I do too.
I think that's great, right? I'll take the overcorrection and the difficulties. I'll take the cleaning up so we can get back to a correction, so we can get back to a sustainable, good model going forward.
Yep.
And make no mistake about it, there have absolutely been companies, entities, lead generation companies, agents who have done it in a very unscrupulous, greedy way that maybe were borderline ethical or fraudulent, that we're not serving the Medicare beneficiaries, right?
100%.
I believe most of that has been course corrected and rooted out, and it's pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
I don't think making an example of the small local field agent that, did an inbound, had a call or something like that, and you're terminated is the way to fix all that.
It's almost like they're being rewarded for terminating agents.
Yes, it's like CMS is going, we want the scalps, and then every week on a call they're like, here you go, here's who we terminated this week, and they're like, good job, more, and that's the environment that we're in right now.
Yeah.
And
do you think that has to do with, the CMS, everyone coming down to the carriers, but does it have to do with the star ratings and things of that nature for the plans that they're writing and terming agents for? Are they worried about that?
Look, everybody's just trying to survive, right? Like, and that's why I say I don't blame the carriers, I don't blame CMS, I don't blame.
Yeah.
The industry's just going through this bloodletting, through this course correction. And I think the industry's better and stronger long term.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't like how the industry's been the past 2 or 3 years, where if you don't have if you can't compete in the virtual space, you just can't do numbers, and you can't but Medicare policies and the plan design specifically of Medicare Advantage was never meant to be sold as a quick microtransaction, nor has it ever been meant to be something that beneficiaries need to change their plan every year or multiple times a year.
Right.
That is ridiculous. And so that aspect of it needs to completely change. And so do I think that having less outreach and less noise to create confusion for consumers is better? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I think that there can never be a way where people can't virtually help somebody and do a great job over the phone? I absolutely do not think that. I think that there is a need for that. I think that the entities like us that continue to find a way to do that in a good job at scale are going to continue to be rewarded, and they're going to continue to grow. And I'm really proud of always the changes we're making to stay ahead and to really plug in a great agent. Yeah. And that's what it actually is, an agent, an insurance agent with a consumer that needs help, and have them have mutual skin in the game to where they're placed on the right plan. And, when you focus on the economics that way, you're going to build a business that does it in the right way and does it more sustainably. And that's why we've never laid off anybody on any of our virtual teams. We've never had to cull people. We've never cut people after AEP. We've never done any of these things that, like, quote unquote call centers do. Yep. Because our DNA was always different, and we're gonna go back to really over-indexing on that.
Yeah, I have a personal experience actually. My girlfriend moved her grandparents from Oklahoma to Utah, and they're both on Medicare. I think one's dual, but anyways, they called the carrier saying, "Hey, I'm moving to Utah. I need to figure out my Medicare." They're like, "Okay, great." They called the carrier. The carrier put them on a different plan in the same state that they're currently living, and didn't even look at the new state that they're moving to. That was one of they called the carrier directly, and that's what happened. So to your point, having a broker who understands and is rewarded for it and knows the ins and outs of all the Medicare plans and what's needed for the consumer is very, very important, because when they got here, actually got one of our field agents to take care of them, and they're like, "I can't believe that they did this." Like, what? So he moved them both, and they're happy, and they have doctor's appointments, and they're ready to roll. And so anyways, to your point, we need brokers out there and agents that understand and know what's going on and actually care.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen, and Aaron's been a big part of this over the past 12 months, is a lot of these third generation agencies and entities that have been living on a HEAP model have kind of realized exactly what I've said. I get on calls with them, and I'm like, "Yeah, let me guess, your cost versus your LTV is not working out, and you need higher margins, right?" And their solution is, "Give me a higher contract. I'll go as earned, but just give me co-op dollars and back-end dollars and the top contract, and give me an advance and loan me some money." And I'm like, "See ya," because you're out of business in a couple of months, And I think you've seen that happen with entity after entity after entity, and it's not been. And my sales pitch was always, "I'd love to help you. Here's what you need to do. Scale back massively on your costs. You need to go as earned. You need to write good quality, healthy business. You need to focus on your residual, build that."
6,
and they're like,
8.
But yeah, man, like I got a nut that I got to cover though. Yeah. It reminds me of that new South Park episode put that up there, Mr. Mackey. He's got a nut.
What makes you want to work for immigration enforcement?
Well, you see, I got a nut.
They've got a nut they got to cover, so they need to write more HEAP policies so they can pay their commissions, so they can pay their overhead. And I'm like, that's not a business. That's a hamster wheel, and you're going to be done.
Yeah.
And we're seeing all of those people just getting out of the industry, right? So I look at who and what's left. eHealth's still around. I think they're got smart leadership, and I think they're going to find a way, right? Like, I don't know what their finances and economics look. Yeah. And I guess a lot of it will depend on what happens with those lawsuits, because I feel like the DOJ needs their big trophies to say, we corrected this out of the industry. Yeah. And I think that they're going to have a long haul. But I still think that there will be some new versions of agencies, virtual agents that like us are built smartly and sophisticated and have good quality business on the books and can do high volumes that are going to remain. That's who I think is going to, and then I'll tell you this, I already know what the new gold rush is going to be. I'm not even going to say it on this podcast. We're already building our team. I know what the new hot thing is going to be and where it's all going. And I know all those guys that we're talking about right now, they're all going to take their shirts off. Anyway, so you go, who's left, right? Who's left in the industry? And I think that it's going to be those that just kind of re-roll. They're all going to change their jersey, and they're going to take their shirt off from being a Medicare HEAP call center, and they're going to go to this next product, and they're going to not do that in a sustainable way. They're going to do it in a, churn and burn way. And until a lot of these sales forces kind of move on out of the industry, we're going to continue to deal with some of the lingering effects of this, where they finally just go, okay, health insurance products just in general aren't meant to be sold like a quick microtransaction, one and done over the phone, and then have no service work on the back end.
Yeah, that's the toughest part, is maintaining that policy. Everyone knows that. That's why they're all on a HEAP model. They don't want to maintain it because it's a lot of work. And so it's definitely a benefit to the brokers that are doing it right now, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's basically what I've got. I mean, I'd love to hear your comments if what I'm saying resonates. Ultimately, I think a lot of the course corrections are good. I
do too.
It's like the forest fire that's burned down everything, and now you're going to have a fresh, new, healthy fire, or the fresh, new, healthy forest grow back in its place. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be better, more beautiful, sustainable in the future.
A lot of headache leading up to it, but it'll all come to fruition. It'll be much better, much better.
So, final thing. If you still are in this space and anything I said resonates with you, hit us up. Hit up Mike, Dan, Agent Boost, anybody at Agent Boost, and say, hey, it sounds like you guys have a good pulse on what's going on. I want to do it the good way, the right way. Help me build it. Then let us know. Love to work with you.
Sir.